Yeah, good morning, my brother. Good to see you.
Aki Auditor is a is a wonderful Nigeria from a wonderful people from Ikorodu. Is a Lagosian. Is an Ikorodu man, and he's doing very good. Blessed with a lot of mineral resources, human resources. Let's start this way, Mister. Okay, let me start with Mister Aki, if you don't mind. Oga Aki, good afternoon for Nigeria time.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning from Canada.
Okay, let's look at it this way. Let's start with food safety, food availability. Let's look at the Canadian version. Then we'll now come to the
Yeah,
topic and come to Mr. Vash.
okay. Thank you so much, Joseph. Good morning from Canada. Good afternoon in Nigeria. It's such a pleasure to join my people over there to have this discussion. Yeah, I have food safety is something that it's very important. It should be important to every country, but it's very important here in Canada.
Hmm.
And availability also all year round. And also the here in Canada, you can get all the food, fruits you need, and that's why Deal Fashi is the vice president of Sustainable Inc. in Canada. They're into greenhouse, and that they can make the availability of the food all year round as a greenhouse. And not just that, they can, even if you have existing farm or greenhouse, they can bring, I mean, by the time he does his presentation, you can see how it can be increased in terms of
Okay,
growth and
Oga
productivity.
Kiabe, put your camera. Let's be seeing your beautiful, handsome face, please.
Oh
You
my,
know what we are doing
we're thinking,
is
okay,
both TV and because you are streaming live on YouTube, Facebook,
okay,
Instagram,
okay,
X, and the rest of them.
okay,
The whole world is watching you and equally listening to you.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay, thank you. So yeah, so safety is very key. I mean, if the food is not properly grown, uh, with the necessary nutrients and materials that will bring health to us as human for consumption, hazards can happen.
Hmm.
And that's why Deal Fashi, the vice president, the sustainable company, let me put it in general, are up to they're up to the task. And by the
By the
time he
time he
does
does
his
his
presentation,
presentation,
and
and
I
I
partner with
partner with
them.
them.
They are in
They are in
Canada
Canada
here. I
here. I
partner with
partner
them,
with
and
them,
they
and
are
they are
really they
willing. They
have
have
the
the
their
their
technology.
technology.
Agric
Agric
technology
technology
is
is
number
number
one all
one
over
all
the
over the
world.
world.
He will
He
tell
will
you
tell you
that,
that,
and that's
and
why
that's
I
why I
can
can
vouch
vouch.
that you, in terms of production, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay, let me come to Mr. Davash now. You have experience from Zambia. Why do you leave us and go to Canada? Let me start with that. You were raised in
Oh,
Zambia.
yeah, like like most people who emigrate from Africa, it's economic migration, right? We are, I grew up in Zambia, which was just transitioning from, I would say, very socialist principles with Dr. KK, and we had our first multi-party elections, and we had a decade of transition, and unfortunately, it was really the economy which was struggling.
Hmm.
And that's really the only reason my parents say that all the time, that we would never left Zambia if there was more opportunities for the kids. Um, and that's something as a Zambian, you always feel that connection back to Africa. And one of my personal goals, in the future, including now, of course, with our sustainable technology, is to help Zambia and Africa greater to improve economic outcomes. And of course, food is the most basic of economic goods, right? Everyone has to eat. I think Canada is is a country that's unique. We are not that very big in terms of population. We're very big in size, but there's a lot of innovation come from Canada, particularly in agriculture. And the Canadian government is more relations, with places all over the world, including countries in Africa. And we do a lot of business around the world, and we're looking forward to doing more business in Africa. We're already actually doing business in Morocco, South Africa, and we'll be soon starting to do business in Kenya. And of course, as we're talking here, we'll be doing business in Nigeria soon as well.
Okay, let's look at the issue of food. If you look at I think one thing that unites all the constitution of any country in the world, the law of survival, that you must eat for you to still remain in existence. And that is the reason those who read the Holy Book, they say God created, we still go back to the Garden of Eden, which we are looking for the location. But some people say that Garden of Eden is actually my village in Edo State. Maybe one of these days you need to go and go back to check the Garden of Eden. So what do you think we can do? Africa is richly blessed. If you come to Nigeria, you see a lot of forests, so many things here. So what do you think the potential in Africa in terms of agriculture? Before, Africa used to get their forest by exporting agri-product to other countries. So what is the missing line?
Well, I think that there's, and I've thought of this question in the context of Zambia, obviously, but I think it applies to most countries in Africa, at least for sub-Saharan Africa. I think there's three things. Number one is, we need governments to make it easier for agriculture to do business, right? And when you think about what do you need for agriculture, there's primarily three things. You need land. Whether you're building a greenhouse or you're doing outdoor, you still need land. Food grows on a certain hectareage of space. You need access to raw materials, whether it's the infrastructure for a greenhouse, fertilizer, water, and so on. And you need labor. And labor, of course, in Africa is plentiful, so that's never really the issue. But I think being able to get access to land in terms of title rights, and I don't know how exactly it works in Nigeria, but I know in Zambia, it's sort of a quasi-ownership of land. You don't necessarily own the land, but you can get rights to a 99-year lease. So for all intents and purposes, you are owning the land. But transferring of those leases of all those land and utilizing that land as an asset, to leverage for a bank, for example, isn't always that easy. And I think that's where some of the laws need to change first and foremost to make it easier for farmers to actually gain an ownership and title to the land and be able to use it as an asset, to be able to get financing from a bank, for example. Banks always want security, and land is often used as a security. So I think that's the first step in making land more, useful from a financial perspective for farmers to start growing. And then access to inputs and raw materials. Again, we live in a world right now in Canada and the US where tariffs and all that is a big, almost the word of the day. Canada imports a lot of things and we export a lot of things. And I know in Africa and in Zambia, and I imagine in Nigeria, it can be cheaper to bring in goods and services, especially raw materials from outside. People always think of Africa as the supplier of raw materials to the world, and the world, turns those raw materials into things, but it can be the other way around as well. And I'm a strong believer that if our governments can make it easier and cheaper by eliminating tariffs and restrictions to bring in raw materials from other parts of the world, that makes it more financially feasible for a farmer to build a greenhouse or whatever type of farm that they want to do. And of course, labor is there. Farming, there is an element of skilled labor, as far as the grower is concerned and the maintenance personnel. But the bulk of labor is in harvesting and planting, and it's not necessarily high skilled labor. And so that's never really an issue. So I think if for Africa to really have this, agricultural revolution, people think about we need big investment and we need this and that. But before we do that, we need to make the actual ease of doing business a lot smoother. And once that is in place, investment comes in. Capital will always find a way to invest in something that can earn a return. But you need those foundations first, and I believe having some of those laws and ease of doing business is the way to unlock this capital and this huge opportunity. I mean, what is there, 1 billion people in Africa now, and whether you're trying to feed your own country or trying to feed your neighbors, in Zambia's case, we have 8 neighbors. So it's not just our 20 million population. We can feed and do trade in terms of agriculture and food with all of our neighbors. And so that opportunity is obviously always going to be there as well.
Okay, I know that in Zambia, I know you should experience maybe crude system of farming too. Let me use that word before deploying technology. How do you migrate from that system down to where you are now, so that we now look at the practical way of doing what you are doing now?
Yeah, I think it's obviously going from a rural farm to even a large outdoor farm or a sophisticated greenhouse is going to require a lot of capital, and it's going to require that expertise. I honestly am not sure whether a rural farmer today, and they might, out of 1,000 rural farmers, I bet you there are at least a handful who have that sort of entrepreneurial, to go out there and do something big. And I think that's where the transition will come from. You just practically can't imagine out of 1,000 rural farmers that all 1,000 of them are going to all of a sudden build big greenhouses. It will be maybe 5 or 10 of them who have that entrepreneurial spirit, that will be the ones to drive that change. But again, entrepreneurs need that environment where they have the freedom, the ease of doing business, the minimal restrictions to actually take their ideas and make them into fruition, right? But remember, just because you have 4 or 5 or 10 out of 1,000 that go and build, bigger agriculture operations, that creates job opportunities that are typically higher paying and more valuable than what your rural farmer would be earning in terms of income on their small farm. So what you might end up seeing, and history has shown you this in other parts of the world, is those other 990, rural farmers who have their small plot of land, they will likely stop farming and most likely end up working, perhaps still in agriculture, but working for, the bigger farms, whether it's a greenhouse or an outdoor farm, where, they'll still be using some of their agricultural skills, but just not as a farm owner, a worker in those farms, but likely earning more income than they would if they're just growing their own food for their own produce, or maybe selling a little bit on the market.
Okay, let's look at the greenhouse. Can you help us? People are listening to it across the whole world. Let's see how. Let's see the greenhouse in Nigeria. We have a lot of green everywhere. It's like forest, but let's see what you are doing practically. Is it possible for you to see something?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And if you'd like, I can share screen just so that
no problem.
Yeah. So, of course, you've already introduced us, so I won't go through this piece here. But the Nigeria greenhouse market is very interesting. And for people who maybe don't know what a greenhouse even is, it's basically any structure that, say, a commercial greenhouse.
Okay. Just hold on 2 seconds. But please, listening to us across the whole world, just go to our YouTube channel, VOP 90.3. You will be seeing the ABC of what we are discussing today. Just go to YouTube, VOP 90.3 FM. You will be seeing everything that we are doing live with us. Let's continue.
Okay. So a greenhouse is basically any structure, typically that has a transparent cover, if you will. So some people describe greenhouses in many ways. They can say a covered structure, a plastic greenhouse. It can be a glass greenhouse. It can be a round greenhouse, a square greenhouse, a triangular greenhouse, but ultimately it's any structure where the crops that are grown inside of it are protected from the elements, essentially protected from rain, wind, cold, but still allows sunshine to go into the greenhouse, which is why they are typically transparent. You need light to grow crops. The irrigation, which is the watering, is provided typically through mechanical methods directly into the roots because you don't have rain entering the greenhouse. And typically the temperature in the greenhouse is regulated. For example, in Canada, in the winter time, they run generators to create heat, which are pumped into the greenhouse to keep the greenhouse warm. When it gets hot, there's several methods. Typically, they will just open the windows to let the hot air out, just like your house. So greenhouses come in all shapes and sizes. Depending on where you are in the world, most of the crops that are grown in greenhouses for food are tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, leafy greens like lettuce, strawberries, and other berries. Those are typically the food crops that are grown in greenhouses. On the other hand, a lot of greenhouses, especially down in the US, grow flowers. So a lot of floriculture is done in greenhouses, roses and chrysanthemums and all sorts of different plants that are more ornamental versus edible plants. Our focus as a company is primarily on greenhouse vegetables and specifically focused on tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, lettuce, and various berries. So in terms of the Nigeria greenhouse market, it's quite interesting. So there's an estimated 1,000 hectares of greenhouses in Nigeria. Currently, it's estimated they're producing about 250,000 tons of food. And this would be a combination of the tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and lettuce. Most of them are considered low-tech greenhouses. And all it means when it's a low-tech greenhouse is that it simply has a cover, a plastic cover, but not much else to do with it. So they wouldn't have things like artificial light. They wouldn't have mechanical irrigation. Perhaps the irrigation is done manually. And some of the other high-tech elements that would be in a more advanced greenhouse. A low-tech greenhouse is more or less just to cover and protect the plants. But it is still more effectively in growing tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and things like that outdoors. Currently, there's actually one greenhouse, which is the largest greenhouse and most productive greenhouse called Wells Hosa. It's in Benin City. They have about 17 hectares of plastic greenhouses, and they're producing about 4,200 tons of vegetables per year. Now, what is very interesting is the government in the southwest of the country, they have a project of building 7 new dams, to help manage water and I imagine some electricity production as well. And part of that plan is actually the establishment of 84 greenhouses around those dams, specifically to address food insecurity in that region. So they've identified that with the dams, they can manage the water and irrigation for the greenhouses more effectively. Electricity, which I imagine would be produced near those dams, can be utilized in the greenhouses. And of course, the area and the land around those dams can be used for greenhouses to produce more food for that region as well. So this is a very interesting initiative that the government of the southwest region of the country has taken up. And that will help advance the Nigerian greenhouse market. Now, 1,000 hectares is fairly large. In Canada, we have about 2,000 hectares of greenhouses, mostly in the Ontario province, which is where Akin and I live. Now, to give you a perspective, however, Morocco, where we do business, they have 15,000 hectares of greenhouses. Now, Morocco is about 40 million people. Nigeria is about 250 million people. A lot of Morocco's produce, especially on the tomatoes, is exported to Europe. However, it gives you an idea that there's a lot of room for growth in Nigeria, whether it's for local consumption or export to other countries in West Africa or possibly in Europe or the Middle East. So there's a lot of room for Nigeria to go from 1,000 hectares, I believe, to maybe 20 or 30,000 hectares and become the largest greenhouse vegetable producer in Africa and potentially in the world, because some of the other countries that have large greenhouses, aside from China, which has a lot, Mexico, where we do business, has almost 20,000 hectares of greenhouses. So Nigeria can in my belief, very quickly advance the number of greenhouses to be able to become one of the largest greenhouse vegetable producers in the world, servicing a large market in West Africa, Europe, Middle East, and other places as well.
This is a very, very wonderful. Is there any plan, maybe research going on that possibly in the near future we can grow like a root crop in the greenhouse, like yam, cassava?
That's a great question. Yeah, because it always occurs to people that, well, they only grow about maybe 3 or 4 varieties of crops in the greenhouse, right? Why don't they grow other crops, tree crops and things like that, or root crops, to your point? I don't know about yam, but I do know from a meeting that we had in Mexico last year at a conference where PepsiCo came to our booth, and we thought, why is PepsiCo interested in what we're doing? They don't grow tomatoes or peppers and things like that. And they said, oh, we grow potatoes, because PepsiCo owns Lay's chips. So they grow potatoes in very low tech, what they call tunnels, which are basically like greenhouses, but they're basically around a tunnel, as the word describes. And so the potatoes are of course, potato is a root crop. The tunnel basically is there to cover the potatoes from the elements. And they cannot use our technology, or they cannot use CO2, which is the product that we provide. But our technology enables them to use CO2. So potentially, yes, there is a way, potential to grow yams and other types of crops. I think a lot of it comes down less to whether you're able to grow something, rather it's an economic question. Whether what you are growing is going to earn you enough revenue, to make a profit. Because of course, when you're operating a greenhouse, there are costs to operating it, to building it, and you have to earn a return from that sale of that crop. And I'm just not sure if yams and some of those crops have high enough value per kilo, for example, to pay for the cost of running a greenhouse.
Okay, that's true. I'm not seeing you again. Want to just be seeing your fine face. Okay, let's look at is there any side effect of crop or any plant that is from greenhouse to our head? Any side effect? Any research in respect of that?
No. I mean, greenhouse crops are grown actually more sanitarily than outdoor crops. To give you an example, every so often, maybe every 10 years or so, Canada imports a lot of lettuce from California that is grown outdoor. And every so often, we'll get an E. coli outbreak, right? Because when you're outdoors, animals go onto the field, they defecate, you're open to the elements. So there's always a risk of some, bacteria or viruses getting into that crop. And then, of course, as it goes into the food chain, people get sick. You never hear of that from greenhouse vegetable crops because they're typically grown in a far more sanitary environment, much more stricter rules on cleanliness and things like that, and produce quality. So if anything, greenhouse vegetable crops is what you should be looking for in your store if you are concerned about, the health of the crop and potential, diseases that you might get from buying that same produce if it was grown outdoors.
Okay, let me come to Mr. Aki Oduto. Ogaki, you are from Ikorodu. You have a lot of land there. What do you think we can do that Nigeria should be embracing this? If you listen to Nigerian news, you have a lot of farmer being killed and found by some element. So I think this should be an opportunity for us to be thinking out of the box in Nigeria on how to actually face the challenge of insecurity to our farmers.
Yes, thank you so much, Joseph. we need to embrace this greenhouse technology and farming. Like we started with safety, and when we talk, and Deal has said that greenhouse will all this cross infection from animals that may want to be eating your crops or passing in some bacteria from them, that is actually eliminated. So if Nigerian can, for food safety, for production, for continuity, and that's one of the things that the sustainable company is trying to project in terms of technology and production. So if we can, maybe not just the government, the private sector as well in Nigeria can come together and say, let us make sure that food is inevitable in any country. And if food is taken care of in the space, in Nigerian space, and even West Africa, like Dio said, that solves almost half of somebody's issue, apart from shelter. So, because I will want to eat before I buy clothes, I will want to eat before I buy some other things. So if the government, together with the private sector, people, investors who may put in some more money, and let's see, not just in land, of course we need land for the greenhouse as well, but it will interest you to know that the amount of land needed for greenhouse won't be as much as the land that will be needed for the natural farming. I believe that will be true Deal, right?
Correct.
So,
yeah.
and then you will even get more yield in the greenhouse. You get, and then the quality of the produce will be better, and you can be sure that you are safe. That's just what I would say. Thank you.
Okay, is there any let me look at I know you might have been in Netherlands, and because I was doing one study that there are some farmer in Netherlands, what they do is just to grow grass for those that do animal farming. In greenhouse, is it possibility of, now Nigeria will talk of ranches, rugas, and the rest of them. Is it possible? Can we equally deploy a green of grasses for animals in ranches in Nigeria through greenhouse?
Possibly. It depends on the type of grass or grain that you're growing. But I know that there are some technologies that it's not just the greenhouse, but it's also like a way of growing, whether it's in a greenhouse or just an indoor warehouse, where the yields that they are getting of the grains and grasses for animal feed are incredible. I mean, something like 50 times more than what you would get if you were growing it outdoors. So if you imagine that scale 50 times more, instead of having 50,000 hectares of land that you have to chop down and, manage, you do that in 1,000 hectares. That is a huge impact, not just on the animals that are being fed, but also on the environment, right? That's important to keep in mind as well. When you're doing things in greenhouses, as Akin said, you don't need as much land. Therefore, you don't need to, clear out as much land, which makes it more environmentally friendly as well.
Okay, let's look at you. This question is for you and Oga Akin now. What do you think we can do that we should be able to allow many African countries to embrace especially in terms of quality? Because when we eat quality food, it means that we reduce the frequency of going to a hospital from one treatment of one disease or the other, which you could make to save some money.
Yeah, I think definitely the way to do it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? That's something to keep in mind. That just because it's new to Africa and Nigeria or Zambia, greenhouses are there in many, many countries in Africa already. For example, in Kenya, where my wife is from, they have thousands of hectares of greenhouses growing roses for export to Europe and the Middle East. So it's not like they don't have the greenhouses. The big question is what is grown in the greenhouses. Now, the company we're working with in Kenya, they grow roses because roses are more valuable to grow and sell, versus maybe growing tomatoes or peppers and so on. So I think some of it also is on the consumer side. People need to understand that they need to eat their tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and lettuce. A lot of it is diet driven as well. If people start eating healthier, such crops will be more, there'll be more of a need to grow such crops in greenhouses as well. So, I don't know the diet in Nigeria, but I know in Zambia, most of the greens are things like relish, more leafy green type stuff versus peppers, tomatoes, and cucumbers. But those are very important crops in terms of nutrients for people to consume. So I think part of it is also educating the public that they need to be eating some of these vine crops, as they call them, because of the nutrient value of them. And as that market and that demand starts to increase, of course, the supply needs to be there, and that supply would come from greenhouses.
Okay, Mr. Aki, let's hear from you.
Yes, please. Thank you. And in addition to what Dila said, greenhouse, like we have earlier said, you have fewer, if not zero pests problem, and then you have minimal land use and also crop diversification, right? We can have this crop diversification, and then greenhouse gives a kind of extended growing season. It's not restricted by, like earlier said by Dio, it's not by climate, the climate control, and for instance, Canada is a cold region, but we have produce all year round. So greenhouse gives you the opportunity to have produce all year round. And it's not that, when it's January, that's when we can have lettuce, or it's only in December we can have tomatoes. So these are things that the greenhouse benefits can give to the country and to the community. And also, I would say that the advantages of having a greenhouse brings the ROI for investors, the return on investment for investors is the yield will be high, both for the operator and for the investors. Thank you.
Okay, so people who are trying to interact with us, but Ogaki, is it is it possible that if I have like 2 acres of land, I can have a greenhouse on the roof or at the base of the house? Is it possible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a movement here in North America where, some of the downtown, they have the big buildings, and typically the top of those big skyscrapers are flat. And so there are certain buildings now that are starting to grow mini greenhouses on there. And, it is very expensive, of course. Everything, when you do in a smaller scale, is more expensive than if you do a bigger scale. But absolutely. I mean, there are literally like residential greenhouses that you can buy, which are 5 meters by 3 meters wide in some cases. And you can literally put it in your backyard and grow your own crops obviously this is not commercial growing, but you can grow your own crops for your own family's consumption, if that's something that's of interest. But 1 or 2 acres is plenty of land. There's greenhouses here in Canada. Yes, we have the big ones that are 10 hectares, 50 hectares, 100 hectares, but there are also some farmers that grow on 1 acre, 2 acres, 3 acres, and they're doing very well for themselves. They are typically the growers that really focus on organic produce, highest quality crops, because they can then fetch higher prices, right? So that's the market that they look for. But at the end of the day, you can literally do a greenhouse from anywhere from 10 square meters to thousands of hectares.
All right. The number is 08036929933. That is the number you can join us, and you can ask a very very wonderful brothers from Canada question in respect of greenhouse, and is a way quality food products and the rest of them. 08036929933. You can join the conversation as we wait for call. Ogaki, just as he said, that instead of having houses, if you come to Nigeria, there are some places you just house heavy houses, nobody is living there, which means that some of those things can be converted to a greenhouse whereby money will still be, the people will still be generating money from there and equally be feeding the citizen.
That's right, my brother. You have rightly said, and interesting you asked that question. I have been wondering, there are houses, massive houses, like you rightly said, Joseph, that people are no longer in there. Even it's just weeds that grow in some of those places. And those places can be adequately converted to greenhouse. And if we have greenhouses in such places without even going to cultivate another land, and it will interest you that even plants can grow better in greenhouses because they can be properly nurtured and cultivated. So it would be good if such people who own the houses or the families who own the houses can look into that. They can either donate or give it to a greenhouse operator, or that they can even get into negotiation if they want money on the house. Something can be done about it, but utilize it rather than the houses, the building wasted away.
So a good example is a federal secretariat. I know you maybe the other time you're in Nigeria, and maybe you might have seen that building from Tom Milan Bridge. We can turn it to a greenhouse, also just leave that place to just be wasting in that place.
Joseph, that place is a massive place and that can be used for greenhouse. The last time I was in Nigeria, like you rightly said, I drove there to go see that. Why is this place just left fallow? Whereby it can be turned to an agricultural building. If such sustainable is engaged to come see the place, I'm sure Deal and the company Sustainable can look at it and turn it around for something that will be more productive in terms of agriculture, rather than just laying fallow there. And such buildings all over Lagos like that, and even across Nigeria, it can be turned into more agricultural productive site. I don't know if Deal has anything to say.
Yes, I was trying to let me ask, is it possibility of us seeing you in Nigeria and look at the potential of us having a lot of massive places whereby we can turn to this and possibly be exporting some of this crop to Europe, even Canada and US and the rest of them, and some forests?
Yeah, definitely. There'll definitely be a trip down at some point as we're starting to build our business throughout Africa. With our technology, particularly at Sustainable, we don't build the greenhouses. We provide a specific technology to greenhouses that nobody else in the world provides, and that is being able to enhance the CO2, the carbon dioxide, in the plant. So humans breathe in oxygen, we breathe out CO2. Plants do the opposite. They breathe in CO2, breathe out oxygen. And so, for many, many years, greenhouses are trying to increase the level of CO2 in the plant so that they can grow more. But it's very difficult to do with traditional methods. With ours, we basically have developed a technology where you can spray it onto the plant. and the plant can absorb that CO2 more easily and therefore grow more produce. And so the net benefit is really to increase the yield and the profitability of a greenhouse. Now, if you can increase the yield and most importantly, the profitability of a greenhouse, it makes an investment in a greenhouse more, more attractive, and the expansion of a greenhouse more attractive as well to increase, the hectarage that you're growing in. So definitely part of our value add is not just to help each individual greenhouse, but it also has a huge impact on the greenhouse industry within the market as well, and the incentive for that greenhouse industry to grow. And so, in the case of Nigeria, one comment I made earlier was the type of crops that are grown in greenhouses are typically vine crops, peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers. Those types of foods particularly tend to be eaten more in urban centers versus in the rural areas. So you already have a ready market in Lagos, which is a huge market where, I'm sure people there tend to eat more of your tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers. And so the question really just comes down to how can those produce be grown? And if there are plots of land throughout the city, which are half an acre, 1 acre, those can be turned into greenhouses very, very easily. Again, they don't have to be high-tech greenhouses, nothing fancy, just a low-tech base greenhouse. And from an investment perspective, a low-tech greenhouse per hectare would cost as low as $100,000 to build. Which is not a massive amount when you think about how much it costs to build a house on a much smaller piece of land, right? So if there are plots that are half an acre, 1 acre, 1 hectare around Lagos that are just fallow, for as little as $100,000 investment, a greenhouse can be built, and you can start serving the local market, and probably the return on that investment will be less than 1 year. And as that return starts to accumulate, that greenhouse, which starts as a low tech, can very quickly start adding new technology like ours or lights or all different technologies that are in greenhouse these days to become even more productive and even more profitable, just by servicing a market like Lagos, which is obviously, I don't know the population, but I think the last time I checked is something like 20 million or something. So almost half the size of Canada, right? So the opportunity is there. I think it just takes some entrepreneurs to recognize that there is an opportunity and try and make it happen.
Maybe we have to find a way to continue to educate our African brothers and sisters that this is another alternative for us to reduce the issue of, the land is not safe for me to go to the farm. You can just capitalize on this, and within your own, the little land you have in Ikorodu, in Ikoyi, Sulere, Yaba, Ajao Estate, then you make best use of it. At least nobody will say that some herdsmen are disturbing the Ogaki.
Yes, that's even, thank you for that, because that's another aspect. Because farmers complain about herdsmen disturbing farm and everything being destroyed. So it will be difficult, I believe, for a greenhouse to be invaded anyhow. And there is going to be more security, there's going to be more protection, and even if it's built on the land, I believe there's still going to be some level of security than just being invaded and destroyed anyhow. So I will suggest that greenhouse should be more encouraged, especially with the herdsmen be invasion on open land. I will encourage that. I don't know if Deal has anything to say.
Yeah, no, I think, look, herdsmen are just trying to move their animals across land, right? And the more land and the bigger the farm is, the more they have to get around that farm, right? And so if you're a herdsman, you'd rather just walk right through the farm. versus when you have a greenhouse that is producing the same amount of crop but in a smaller area. There's not, like basically your herdsman doesn't have to move around 5,000 hectares of land to get from one end to the other. If you're just on, a much smaller plot, right? So there are those side benefits that I'd never even thought of to building a greenhouse. Those are things that do have an impact, and they can be solved by building a greenhouse, literally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dave Vash, our Vice President, Sustainable Inc., a Canadian agri-tech company. Thank you very much for joining us. And Oga Aki, thank you very much for continuing to do very, very great. You are making us proud in Canada, and let the Western media be focusing on you, some of those wonderful things that you are doing, not to be focusing on those negative things that say, our brothers in Africa, they are doing or let them focus on some of these wonderful things. Thank you very, very much for joining us.
Yeah, and before I go, let me just say to this that this technology that Sustainable is into and greenhouse can be a way of providing jobs for the upcoming youth. Mm-hmm. Let them know that, I know, Joseph, in Nigeria, no youth wants to go into farm. But this is like an upgrade of farming. And if that's, I believe I'm going to sit down with Sustainable. We're going to have a trip to Nigeria to come and do a presentation. I'll let you know, Joseph, so that the youth can know that it's not just white collar job. They shouldn't be running away from farming. When they see such way of farming, and they see the quality, and they see the produce this, I mean, they see the finesse of it, I'm sure they'll be able to embrace it properly, and there will be less issue about crime and about youth in the society. That's I don't know if Jill has any.
That's a great. Oh my, farming, boring industry, right? And people want something that's exciting, and then you realize greenhouses are all about technology, new technology. Whether you're an engineer or artificial intelligence, software designer, architecture, there is so much technology that goes into a greenhouse that for a young person, that is very, very exciting, and it is a very exciting industry. It's not just, watching plants grow. There's a lot more that goes to it. So I think that should hopefully encourage young people to pursue a career in the greenhouse industry.
Thank you very much for joining us. You can still go and listen to this. Just go to VOP on YouTube. The recording is there. You can listen. I will continue to share this to all our platforms so that people should know that there's no excuse. You can create some job for yourself using the greenhouse. Thank you very much for your heat here. I mean, there is cold in Canada, right? It's Canada. Very soon, maybe I will start a business by exporting sun from Africa to Canada.
Yes, please.
Yes. Go into it, containerize it, and then we'll send you some snow.
All right.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Joseph Olorenshaw, and this is Safety, Security, and the People's Right. You're listening to a wonderful brother all the way from Canada. We'll be here again for another wonderful topic Wednesday, 1 to 2 p.m. as usual, and this is VOP 90.3. You can listen to in any part of the world, either through X, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and the rest of them. Thank you very much. My name is Joseph Olorenshaw. Please stay out of trouble, and definitely trouble will stay out of you. Bye bye.
Thank you.